The massive crystal device hummed in the center of the great hall on Nexus Prime. Its surface was smooth like glass, but it glowed with a strange blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The sound it made was low and deep, and somehow every person in the room could understand what it was saying, no matter what language they spoke. "Seeking prototype origin warrior," the device repeated again and again. Captain Zara Voss stood with her small human team on the upper level of the hall. She watched as hundreds of alien beings filled the space below. They had come from all over the galaxy when the device first appeared 3 months ago. No one knew where it came from or who built it. The scientists found it buried deep in the ruins of an ancient city on this neutral planet. "Look at all of them," whispered Dr. Elena Vasquez, standing next to Zara. Elena was the science officer on their ship, the Wanderer. She was a small woman with gray hair and thick glasses. She studied old alien ruins for a living, which was not very exciting work most of the time. Below them, the greatest warriors from dozens of different species waited their turn. The Kraxi were first in line. They were huge creatures 10 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like armor plating. Their champion stepped forward. His name was Grokthul, and he had never lost a battle. His 4 hands could each crush a steel beam. Grokthul placed his massive palm on the crystal surface. The device scanned him for a long moment. Then its blue light turned red. "Rejected," the device announced. A loud murmur went through the crowd. If Grokthul was not good enough, who could be? Next came the Ethereal Collective. These beings looked like tall, thin humans made of silver light. They did not have bodies like everyone else. Instead, they were pure thought and energy. Their warrior could move objects with her mind and read thoughts from across a star system. She touched the device with her glowing hand. Again, the red light. Rejected. The crowd grew restless. One by one, the finest warriors from each species tried the device. The shape-shifting Marathi sent their deadliest assassin, a creature that could become anyone or anything. Rejected. The Nexari brought their perfect soldier, half machine and half living tissue, stronger and faster than any natural being. Rejected. The Zephyrian battle queens came forward. These were the leaders of a hive mind that controlled entire fleets of ships with their thoughts. Rejected. The Draconian Empire sent their champion, a being who could breathe fire hot enough to melt starship hulls. Rejected. Hour after hour it went on. Warriors who had conquered worlds and defeated entire armies were turned away by the ancient device. The greatest heroes of the galaxy were not what it was looking for. Ambassador Kethmar of the Draconian Empire was getting angry. He was a large lizard-like creature with golden scales and eyes like burning coals. He looked up at the human delegation with disgust. "Why are the humans even here?" he said in a voice like rolling thunder. "Their species has barely left their homeworld. They have been traveling between stars for only 200 years. What could they possibly offer that we cannot?" Other alien leaders nodded in agreement. The humans were the newest members of the galactic community. They had no great warriors, no amazing technology, no special powers. They were just ordinary people who had learned to build spaceships. Captain Zara felt her face grow red with embarrassment. She knew the other species looked down on humans. They saw Earth's people as weak and primitive. Most human weapons could not even scratch the armor of alien warriors. Human ships were slow compared to the fastest alien vessels. "Maybe we should just go," said Lieutenant Torres, the ship's pilot. "We do not belong here with these people." But Dr. Elena Vasquez was not listening to the conversation. She was staring at the crystal device with a strange look in her eyes. She had spent her whole life studying the ruins of ancient civilizations. Something about this device was familiar to her. "The energy pattern," she whispered to herself. "I have seen this before." She pulled out her tablet and began searching through her research files. Years ago, she had explored ruins on a dead planet in the Outer Rim. The buildings there had the same type of crystal formations, the same energy signatures. "The same harmonic frequencies, Captain," Elena said, grabbing Zara's arm. "I think I know what this is." Down below, the last of the great warriors had been rejected. The crowd was getting angry and confused. Some aliens were starting to argue with each other, others were beginning to leave. "The devices from the predecessors," Elena explained quietly. "The civilization that disappeared millions of years ago. I found similar technology in their ruins. The predecessors were a mystery that had puzzled scientists for centuries. They had once ruled a vast empire across the galaxy. Their technology was far beyond anything that existed today. But then suddenly they were gone. No one knew what happened to them. So what does that mean? Zara asked. I think the device is looking for something specific, Elena said. Something in the genetic code. The predecessors left clues in their ruins about a great danger coming from outside the galaxy. Maybe this device is meant to find someone who can stop it. Ambassador Kethmar's voice boomed across the hall. This is useless. The device is broken or the predecessors were fools. There is no warrior here that meets its requirements. Wait, Captain Zara called out, her voice carrying over the noise. Humanity would like to try. The hall fell silent. Then laughter began to ripple through the crowd. The idea that a human could succeed where the galaxy's greatest warriors had failed was ridiculous. You cannot be serious, Kethmar said, his eyes glowing brighter. Your people are barely more than children playing with toys they do not understand. But Elena was already walking down the steps toward the device. She felt drawn to it somehow, like it was calling to her personally. Her heart was beating fast and her hands were shaking a little. Elena, what are you doing? Zara called after her. I have to try, Elena said. Something about this feels right. The crowd parted as the small human woman walked toward the towering crystal device. She looked tiny and fragile compared to the massive alien warriors who had tried before her. Elena was 53 years old with arthritis in her hands and asthma that made her carry an inhaler everywhere. She was not a soldier or a fighter. She was just a scientist who liked to dig through old ruins. But as she approached the device, something strange happened. The blue light began to pulse faster. The humming sound grew louder. It was almost like the device was excited. Elena reached out with one shaking hand and placed her palm against the smooth crystal surface. The material felt warm and seemed to vibrate under her touch. For a moment, nothing happened. The hall was completely silent. Everyone held their breath. Then the device exploded with golden light. The light was so bright that everyone had to cover their eyes. The humming sound became a musical note that filled the air with harmony, and through it all the device's voice rang out clear and strong. Prototype Origin recognized, initiating warrior protocol. When the light faded, Elena was still standing there, but something had changed. Her eyes were glowing with the same golden light as the device. Ancient symbols were floating in the air around her, writing themselves in languages that no one had seen for millions of years. The crowd stared in shock and disbelief. The human had done what no one else could do. She had awakened something that had been sleeping for longer than anyone could remember. And somewhere deep in space, ancient sensors that had been quiet for eons began to detect movement in the dark void between galaxies. Something vast and hungry was stirring. Drawn by the signal from the device, the real test was about to begin. The golden light around Elena grew brighter and brighter. She felt something flowing into her mind like water filling an empty cup. Images flashed before her eyes, memories that were not her own. She saw great cities made of crystal and light. She saw beings that looked almost human, but moved like they could bend the laws of nature with their thoughts. The device began projecting these images into the air above the hall. Everyone could see what Elena was seeing. The holographic pictures showed a civilization more advanced than anything in the current galaxy. The predecessors, whispered one of the alien scientists. The images showed the predecessors at the height of their power. They could make stars dance in new patterns. They could fold space like paper to travel across the galaxy in seconds. They could build planets and reshape matter with simple gestures. But Elena saw something else in the memories. Fear. The predecessors were running from something. The last images showed them working frantically on some kind of project. They were building devices like the scanner and hiding them across the galaxy. Warning systems, Elena said, her voice sounding strange and distant. They knew something was coming. The device's voice spoke again, but now it was different. Instead of the simple request for a warrior, it began telling a story that no one had heard for millions of years. The Devourers approach from the void between galaxies. They consume the fundamental forces that hold matter together. The predecessors fought them and lost. Before transcending to a higher plane of existence, the predecessors seeded the galaxy with genetic templates. The inheritor species must be awakened before the ancient enemy returns. Elena felt more memories flooding into her mind. She saw the war between the predecessors and something that defied description. The Devourers were not just another alien species. They were entropy itself given form. They ate the basic forces of physics and left nothing but empty space behind. The predecessors did not die, Elena said, understanding coming to her like pieces of a puzzle falling into place.
They evolved beyond physical form.
But before they left, they planted seeds. She turned to look at the crowd of aliens staring at her. Humans are not just another species. We are the children of the predecessors. The genetic template they left behind has been sleeping in our DNA for millions of years. Ambassador Kethmar stepped forward, his golden scales shimmering with anger. Impossible. Humans are primitive creatures. How could they be related to the greatest civilization in galactic history? But the device was already showing more images. DNA patterns appeared in the air, comparing human genetic code to samples found in predecessor ruins. The match was not perfect, but it was close enough. Millions of years of evolution had changed humanity, but the core patterns were still there. The predecessors chose Earth as one of their seed worlds, Elena explained. The ancient knowledge flowing through her mind. They knew that their perfect civilization had a weakness. They were too logical, too ordered. When they faced pure chaos and entropy, they could not adapt. More memories came to her. The predecessors had tried to fight the Devourers with perfect strategy and flawless technology. But the Devourers fed on order and structure. Every logical attack made them stronger. So they created us, Elena continued. A species that could think in ways they could not. Chaotic, unpredictable, emotional, everything they were not. Suddenly, alarms began ringing throughout the hall. Admiral Kex Vor of the Galactic Defense Fleet burst into the room with a team of officers behind him. Long-range sensors have detected massive gravitational anomalies at the galaxy's edge, he announced. Unknown objects moving faster than anything we have on record. They are consuming entire star systems as they advance. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The awakening of the device had sent out a signal across space. The Devourers knew that their ancient enemy's children had finally awakened. How long do we have? Captain Zara asked. At their current speed, they will reach the core worlds in 6 months, Admiral Kexvor replied. Elena closed her eyes and reached deeper into the predecessor memories. She saw fleets of ships that could reshape reality engaged in battle with things that should not exist. The Devourers were not just powerful. They were the opposite of existence itself. Our weapons will not work against them, she said quietly. Conventional warfare will only make them stronger. They feed on energy and matter and the forces that hold the universe together. Then how do we fight them? Demanded Kethmar. Elena opened her eyes and they were still glowing with golden light. We do not fight them the way the predecessors did. We fight them the way only humans can. She began to pace back and forth, her mind racing with possibilities. The predecessor knowledge was mixing with her own human intuition in ways that created entirely new ideas. The Devourers are creatures of pure logic and entropy, she explained. They can process and consume anything that follows natural laws. But what happens when they encounter something that makes no sense? What happens when they try to consume a paradox? The alien leaders looked confused, but Captain Zara was beginning to understand. She had served with human crews for years. She knew how humans could solve problems in ways that made no logical sense but somehow worked anyway. You want to confuse them, Zara said. Not just confuse them, Elena replied with a smile that was both human and something else. I want to break their ability to process reality itself. She turned to address the entire assembly. I need to gather every human in the galaxy. Military, civilian, scientists, artists, engineers, teachers, children, everyone. What for? Admiral Kexvor asked. To teach them how to use abilities they never knew they had, Elena said. The predecessor genetic template is not just in me. It is in every human. Most of it is dormant, but it can be awakened. She gestured to the crystal device, which was still glowing with soft golden light. This scanner is not just a detector. It is also an activator. It can unlock the potential that has been sleeping in human DNA for millions of years. Over the next few hours, Elena worked with the alien scientists to understand how the device functioned. It was incredibly complex, operating on principles that seemed to blend science and something like magic. But Elena found that she could understand it in ways that surprised everyone, including herself. The first test subject was Lieutenant Torres from Elena's own ship. When he placed his hand on the scanner, nothing dramatic happened at first. But then he began to demonstrate abilities that no human should have. He could sense the emotional states of people around him. He could make small objects move with his thoughts, Most importantly, he could think in ways that created logical paradoxes. "I can see 3 different solutions to this math problem," Torres said, staring at an equation on a tablet, "and they are all correct, even though they contradict each other." More humans arrived from ships docked at Nexus Prime. Each one who touched the scanner gained different abilities, but they all shared one common trait. Their enhanced human minds could create ideas that violated logic while still somehow making sense. Elena realized that this was exactly what they needed. The Devourers could consume anything that followed natural laws. But how could they process something that was simultaneously true and false? How could they eat energy that existed and did not exist at the same time? As word spread through the galactic communication networks, more humans began arriving at Nexus Prime. But so did troubling reports from the outer rim of the galaxy. The Devourers were not just consuming star systems. They were erasing them from existence entirely. Planets, stars, even the space they occupied simply stopped being. It was as if reality itself was being deleted. Elena looked up at the stars visible through the hall's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, an enemy that had destroyed the greatest civilization in galactic history was coming for them. But for the first time in millions of years, that enemy was going to encounter something truly unexpected. They were going to face humanity. 2 months had passed since Elena first touched the scanner. Nexus Prime had become the busiest place in the galaxy, as humans arrived from every corner of known space. The small diplomatic station had grown into a massive training facility almost overnight. Elena stood in the main laboratory, watching a group of human children work with predecessor technology. 8-year-old Marcus Chen was making a crystal computer solve math problems by telling it jokes. The device should not have understood humor, but somehow it was laughing and giving correct answers. The children learned fastest, Elena told Dr. Sarah Kim, a human psychologist who had come to study the awakening process. Their minds are not fixed in logical patterns yet. Nearby, a human artist named Paolo was painting with light itself, creating pictures that existed in 3 dimensions and changed based on who was looking at them. A human engineer had built a tool that fixed broken machines by making them remember when they worked properly. Each human who touched the scanner gained different abilities, but they all shared the same strange way of thinking. They could hold contradictory ideas in their minds without going crazy. They could solve problems by ignoring the rules that made the problems impossible to solve. Elena had changed the most. She could access vast libraries of predecessor knowledge, but she also remained completely human. The combination created insights that neither species could have achieved alone. "The reports from the outer rim are getting worse," Captain Zara said, joining Elena at the observation window. "The Devourer advance fleet has consumed the Kepler system entirely. Nothing left but empty space." Elena nodded grimly. She had been studying the attack patterns through the predecessor memories. The Devourers moved like a plague, consuming everything in their path. But they were not just destroying, they were feeding and growing stronger. "The Galactic fleet engaged them yesterday," Zara continued. "Admiral Kexfor used every weapon we have. Plasma cannons, gravity bombs, reality disruptors. Nothing worked. The Devourers absorbed it all and became larger. The predecessors made the same mistake," Elena said. "They thought more power was the answer. Bigger weapons, stronger shields, more logical strategies. But the Devourers are not just powerful. They are the opposite of existence. Fighting them with conventional force is like trying to fill a hole by digging it deeper." She turned to watch a group of human soldiers training with their new abilities. Sergeant Maria Santos could make bullets that curved around corners by convincing them that straight lines were boring. Corporal James Wright had taught his rifle to shoot different types of energy depending on his mood. "Are they ready?" Zara asked. Elena considered the question carefully. The humans had made remarkable progress, but they were about to face an enemy that had consumed entire galaxies. They are as ready as anyone can be to do something impossible. The main door to the laboratory slid open, and Ambassador Keth Mar entered with a group of alien military leaders. The Draconian ambassador had been skeptical of the human abilities from the beginning, but the approaching crisis had made him willing to consider any option. "Show us," Keth Mar said without any greeting pleasantries. "Prove that these humans can do what your greatest warriors could not." Elena led the group to a testing chamber where Lieutenant Torres was working with a complex problem. The chamber contained a perfect cube made of the same material as Devourer ships, a substance that absorbed all forms of energy and matter it touched. "This material is indestructible," explained Dr. Kim. "Our scientists have tried every known method of affecting it. Nothing works." Torres approached the cube with a confident smile. Instead of using any weapon or tool, he simply knocked on it politely and said, "Excuse me, but I think you might be lost." The cube began to shimmer and change color. "You see," Torres continued, talking to the cube like it was a person, "you are supposed to be indestructible, but I am supposed to be able to affect you. Since we are both supposed to be right, maybe we can work something out." The cube suddenly folded itself into the shape of a flower and began glowing with soft pink light. The alien observers stared in shock. Ambassador Kethmar's mouth hung open, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "How?" he managed to ask. "Simple," Torres replied. "I convinced it that being indestructible was less interesting than being helpful. Things want to have a purpose, even pieces of devourer technology." Elena smiled at the demonstration, but she knew the real test would be much harder. The devourers themselves were not just technology. They were living manifestations of entropy and chaos. Convincing them to change would be like asking the concept of darkness to become light. Over the following weeks, Elena worked with teams of humans to develop new strategies. They could not rely on conventional warfare, so they had to invent entirely new forms of combat. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jenny Martinez, a 10-year-old girl from Earth's Luna colony, was playing with a group of alien children when she solved a problem that had been puzzling the greatest minds in the galaxy. "Why do not we just ask the devourers what they want?" Jenny suggested during a strategy meeting. "Maybe they are just hungry and do not know how to ask for food politely." The adult humans and aliens looked at each other with embarrassment. In all their complex planning, none of them had considered the possibility that the devourers might be something other than pure evil. Elena dove back into the predecessor memories, looking for any information about devourer motivations. What she found changed everything. The devourers were not invaders from another galaxy. They were a natural phenomenon like cosmic antibodies. When any civilization became too powerful and stable, the devourers appeared to restore balance to the universe. The predecessors triggered their own destruction, Elena explained to the assembled leaders. They became so advanced and orderly that the universe itself sent the devourers to reset the balance. "So we are doomed no matter what we do?" Admiral Kexvor asked. "Not necessarily," Elena replied. "The devourers respond to excess order and stability. But what happens when they encounter a civilization that runs on chaos and contradiction?" She gestured to the humans around her, who were performing impossible tasks with casual ease. "We are not trying to become more powerful than the predecessors. We are trying to become something they never thought of: organized chaos." The plan that emerged was unlike anything in military history. Instead of fighting the devourers directly, the humans would transform the entire galaxy into a massive contradiction that the devourers could not process. Working with alien allies, human teams began installing paradox generators on planets throughout the galaxy. These devices, built using hybrid human predecessor technology, created localized fields where logical contradictions became physical reality. On the planet Dracos, gravity began flowing upward on Tuesdays. The water on Ethereal Prime started being wet and dry at the same time. Space stations began playing music that could be heard in the vacuum of space. The effects were not harmful to life, but they created a galaxy that operated on dream logic rather than physical laws. It was organized enough to function, but chaotic enough to defy comprehension. Elena established herself as the coordinator of this massive project, which the humans had started calling Operation Cosmic Confusion. She worked 18-hour days, managing teams across hundreds of star systems. But even as the preparations continued, the Devourer main fleet was getting closer. Long-range sensors showed a darkness approaching that seemed to eat light itself. Entire sectors of space were going silent as the enemy advanced. The final test was coming, and Elena knew that either humanity's impossible plan would work, or the galaxy would join the countless others that had been consumed by the entropy at the end of all things. In her private moments, she wondered if the predecessors had been right to transcend physical existence. It was so much easier to run away than to stand and fight the impossible. But then she would see a human child teaching an alien how to think sideways, Or watch a human engineer fix a broken star by asking it nicely to work again, and she would remember why they had to try. The galaxy had spent millions of years being logical and orderly. It was time to try something completely different. The Andorian system died on a Tuesday. Elena watched the sensor readings from the command deck of the human ship Paradox, knowing that 6 billion people had just ceased to exist. The Devourer advance fleet had arrived at the outer edge of civilized space, and their first target was gone as if it had never been. Long-range scanners show complete spatial collapse, reported Lieutenant Torres, his enhanced human senses reading data that normal instruments could not detect. The star, the planets, even the space they occupied, all gone. Elena nodded grimly. She had seen this in the predecessor memories, but witnessing it happen was different. The Devourers did not just destroy things. They unmade them at the fundamental level, erasing their existence from reality itself. Fleet status? Elena asked. Captain Zara checked her displays. 200 human ships in formation, plus volunteers from 37 alien species. Not exactly what anyone would call a proper battle fleet. Elena looked at the mixed collection of vessels floating in space around them. Human cargo ships flew alongside Craxi battlecruisers. Ethereal scout vessels moved in formation with draconian destroyers. None of their weapons would work against the Devourers, but that was not the point. Remember, Elena broadcast to all ships, we are not here to fight them. We are here to confuse them so badly that they forget what they came here to do. The human crews had spent weeks training for this moment. Each ship carried teams of humans who had learned to think in impossible ways. They had artists who could paint with gravity, musicians who made songs out of mathematical equations, and engineers who built machines that worked on pure stubbornness. The Devourer fleet appeared on sensors like a spreading stain against the stars. There were dozens of them, each one larger than a space station. They moved through space by eating the vacuum itself, leaving trails of absolute nothingness behind them. Beginning Operation Cosmic Confusion, Elena announced. The first phase started immediately. Human pilots began flying their ships in patterns that created paradoxes in three-dimensional space. Ship A flew in a straight line, while simultaneously flying in a circle. Ship B traveled faster than light while standing perfectly still. Ship C existed in two different locations at the same time, while being completely absent from both. The Devourers slowed their advance, their ancient sensors struggling to process what they were seeing. These patterns should not be possible according to any known laws of physics. Elena felt through her connection to predecessor knowledge that the Devourers were becoming confused. They were creatures of pure logic and entropy, designed to consume order and structure. But how could they consume something that was both orderly and chaotic at the same time? Phase 2, Elena commanded. The human crews began implementing the strategies they had developed during training. Sergeant Santos fired bullets that curved around the Devourers and came back to apologize for missing. Corporal Wright used a weapon that shot kindness-enhanced plasma bolts that made their targets feel better about being attacked. A human engineer named David Park launched a missile that split into 17 different missiles, each one taking a completely different path to the same target, while somehow all being the same missile. The Devourers tried to absorb these attacks, but their normal process of consuming energy was disrupted. How could they eat a bullet that was simultaneously fired and not fired? How could they absorb energy that was both harmful and helpful? It is working, Torres reported with excitement. The smaller Devourers are showing signs of processing errors. Their movement patterns are becoming erratic. But Elena knew the real test was yet to come. The advance fleet was just scouts. The Devourer Prime, the entity that had consumed the predecessor homeworld millions of years ago, was approaching from the edge of the system. When it appeared, Elena understood why the predecessors had failed. The Devourer Prime was not just large, it was vast beyond comprehension. It existed as a living void, a hole in reality shaped like hunger itself. Looking at it through the sensors made Elena's enhanced human mind struggle to process what she was seeing. All ships fall back to minimum safe distance, Elena ordered. I am going to handle this one personally. Elena, no, Captain Zara protested. We can support you with the fleet. This fight is not going to happen in normal space, Elena replied, already moving toward the ship's teleporter system. The Devourer Prime exists across multiple dimensions. I need to meet it where it lives. Elena used her enhanced abilities to project herself into the space between dimensions where the Devourer Prime resided. It was a place where normal physics did not apply, where thought and reality blended together in ways that would drive ordinary minds insane. The Devourer Prime noticed her immediately. It was ancient beyond measure, old enough to remember the birth of galaxies. Its voice echoed through dimensions when it spoke. Predecessor, child, you have awakened the template too. Lady, entropy must balance order, consumption. Must follow creation. Elena found herself standing on what looked like a platform made of crystallized time, facing a being that appeared as a constantly shifting void in the shape of something that might once have been alive. You are wrong, Elena said, her voice carrying across impossible distances. We are not trying to repeat the predecessor's mistakes. We are trying something completely different. All civilizations seek order. All order creates imbalance. All imbalance summons us. Elena smiled, and in that smile was everything that made humanity unique in the galaxy. But what if we do not seek order? What if we create organized chaos instead? She began to demonstrate what she meant. Using abilities that combined predecessor knowledge with human intuition, Elena started creating paradoxes in the space around them. She made herself simultaneously older and younger than the Devourer Prime. She created energy that was both infinite and zero at the same time. She sang a song that could only be heard by not listening to it. The Devourer Prime tried to consume these paradoxes, but its ancient processes began to break down. It was designed to eat order and structure, but Elena was feeding it chaos that was somehow also organized. Impossible, the entity said, its voice showing confusion for the first time in millions of years. That is exactly the point, Elena replied. Humans specialize in making impossible things happen. We are not logical like the predecessors. We are not chaotic like pure entropy. We are something new. Organized chaos, logical contradictions, impossible possibilities. She reached out with her enhanced senses and began teaching the Devourer Prime something no one had ever tried to teach it before. How to appreciate absurdity. Elena showed it human. Art that made no sense but was beautiful anyway. She shared human music that broke mathematical rules but created perfect harmony. She demonstrated human love, which was completely illogical, but somehow made everything better. The ancient entity began to change. Its void-like form started to develop colors that should not exist. Its hunger began to transform into something like curiosity. We do not understand, the Devourer Prime admitted. You do not have to understand, Elena said gently. That is the whole point. Some things are meant to be experienced, not understood. Some contradictions are meant to exist without being resolved. Around them, the other Devourers had stopped their advance. They were floating motionless in space, their ancient programming unable to process a galaxy that ran on organized chaos. Elena felt a change happening throughout the local universe. The paradox generators that human teams had installed were working together to create a field of organized chaos that extended across multiple star systems. Reality itself was becoming flexible, responsive to creativity rather than rigid laws. We offer you a new purpose, Elena said to the Devourer Prime. Instead of consuming civilizations that become too ordered, help us maintain the balance between order and chaos. Help us keep the galaxy interesting. The ancient entity considered this for a long moment that lasted several hours in normal time. This could be interesting, it finally said, and for the first time in its existence, the Devourer Prime began to laugh. The sound of cosmic laughter echoed across dimensions and star systems, marking the moment when the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known became its most unusual ally. 6 months after the Battle of Andorian Space, Elena stood in her new office on Nexus Prime, watching children from a dozen different species play a game that should have been impossible. Human kids were teaching young Craxy how to play opposite day, where gravity worked backwards, and blue meant red, and everyone had to tell the truth by lying. A small draconian child successfully made a flower grow downward into the ground, while the flower's roots reached up toward the sky. A young ethereal managed to think a thought so backwards that it made everyone nearby temporarily forget their own names in the most delightful way. The Department of Necessary Impossibilities is officially operational, Captain Zara said, entering the office with a stack of reports. though I still think that is the strangest department name in galactic government history. Elena smiled as she watched a human teacher show an alien student how to walk through a wall by politely asking the wall to step aside. It needs to be strange. The moment we start making sense, the universe might send something worse than the Devourers to restore balance. The transformation of galactic civilization had been remarkable to witness. The crisis with the Devourers had forced every species to reconsider their assumptions about how reality was supposed to work. Rigid military hierarchies learned to value creative chaos. Scientific institutions discovered that impossible experiments often produced the most useful results. On the planet Dracos, the formerly warlike Draconian Empire had developed a passion for competitive flower arranging, using controlled gravity fields. Their arrangements defied every law of physics and were absolutely beautiful. The ethereal collective, once focused on pure logic and harmony, had discovered the joy of arguing about meaningless topics for hours just because debate was fun. The Craxi military had incorporated human-style, organized confusion into their battle tactics, winning war games by doing exactly what their enemies expected them not to do. Even the conservative Nexari had started experimenting with constructive illogic in their engineering projects. Status report on the Devourer integration project? Elena asked, settling into her chair that was simultaneously both comfortable and completely wrong for sitting in. Surprisingly successful, Zara replied, consulting her tablet. The Devourer Prime has been helping stabilize paradox fields in the Outer Rim territories. 3 smaller Devourers have requested assignment to Academy worlds where they can learn more about organized chaos from human children. Elena shook her head in amazement. The ancient cosmic entities that had once been the galaxy's greatest threat were now its most enthusiastic students. They had discovered that creating interesting contradictions was much more satisfying than simply consuming order. The Devourer Prime had taken the name Professor Entropy and was currently teaching a course on advanced impossibility theory at the Galactic Science Institute. Its lectures were standing room only, despite the fact that most students came away more confused than when they started. Any word from Earth? Helena asked. The Terran Council is still adapting to having the galaxy's most important human living on Nexus Prime instead of Earth, Zara replied, though they have stopped complaining since tourism to Sol System increased by 800%. Apparently, everyone wants to see the homeworld of the species that defeated entropy with organized confusion. Elena laughed. We did not defeat entropy. We just taught it to be more creative. A chime sounded, indicating an incoming priority message. Elena activated the holographic display and the image of Admiral Kexvor appeared. The Nexari officer looked excited, which was unusual for his typically serious species. Elena, we have a situation that requires your expertise, the Admiral said without preamble. Long-range sensors have detected new anomalies at the edge of the galaxy. Elena felt a familiar chill. Not more Devourers, I hope. No, something different. The energy signatures suggest entities of pure order and logic. They appear to be, how did your people put it, extremely annoyed by the current state of galactic chaos. Elena sighed and rubbed her temples. She had wondered when this would happen. The galaxy had become so chaotic and contradictory that it was bound to attract attention from the opposite end of the cosmic spectrum. Order beings, she said, probably drawn here by all the organized chaos we have been creating. They must think the galaxy has gone completely insane. The preliminary analysis suggests they are planning to correct the local reality distortions, Admiral Kexvor continued. They want to restore proper logical function to this sector of the universe. Of course they do, Elena said, already starting to smile. Well, I suppose the Department of Necessary Impossibilities needs a new project. Over the following days, Elena worked with her expanded team to develop strategies for dealing with entities of pure logic and order. It was like preparing to fight the complete opposite of the Devourers, which presented entirely different challenges. The order entities, as they came to be called, approached the galaxy with the methodical precision of cosmic accountants. They began correcting star systems by removing all paradoxes and contradictions. Planets that had been running on dream logic were forcibly returned to normal physics. Space stations that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously were collapsed into single logical configurations. They are not evil, Elena explained to the emergency council session. They are just convinced that reality should make sense according to proper rules. From their perspective, we have turned the galaxy into a cosmic joke that needs to be fixed. The first diplomatic contact was attempted by Ambassador Keth Mar, who tried to negotiate with the Order entities using traditional logical arguments. The conversation lasted exactly 47 seconds before the entities classified him as corrupted by chaos and placed him in a logical containment field until he could be properly debugged. Right, Elena said after they managed to rescue the ambassador. No logic with the logic beings. We need to try something completely different. The solution came from an unexpected source once again. Jenny Martinez, now 11 years old and one of the department's most valued consultants, suggested they try aggressive kindness combined with educational confusion. What if we teach them that order and chaos can be friends? Jenny proposed during a strategy meeting. Like, what if we show them that contradictions are not broken logic, but logic that is trying to be more than one thing at once? Elena decided to lead the diplomatic mission personally. She took a small team of humans and friendly aliens to meet with the Order entity fleet at the edge of the galaxy. Instead of weapons, they brought art supplies, musical instruments, and a box of Earth-style cookies. The leader of the Order entities was a being of crystalline perfection that existed as living mathematics. It spoke in equations and thought in geometrical forms. Its name translated approximately to Prime Directive of Logical Consistency. You have corrupted this galaxy with chaotic paradoxes, Prime Directive stated when Elena's team arrived. Reality must follow proper rules. We will restore logical function to all affected systems. Before you do that, Elena said politely, would you like to try a cookie? They are made using a recipe that is simultaneously healthy and unhealthy, depending on how much you enjoy eating them. Prime Directive paused, its mathematical consciousness struggling to process the concept of food that changed its nutritional value based on the consumer's emotional state. That is not possible, it said. Try one and see, Elena suggested, offering a chocolate chip cookie that was somehow both warm from the oven and chilled from a refrigerator at the same time. Prime Directive accepted the cookie with confusion. When it analyzed the treat, its sensors detected contradictory properties that should have been mutually exclusive. But when it tasted the cookie, the entity experienced something it had never encountered before, the sensation of logical rules being bent without being broken. This is pleasant, Prime Directive admitted with surprise. Elena spent the next several hours teaching the Order entity about constructive contradictions, paradoxes that enhanced rather than disrupted the underlying systems. She showed how the galaxy's organized chaos had actually made civilization more stable and creative, not less logical. The breakthrough came when Prime Directive realized that perfect order and creative chaos could work together to create something greater than either could achieve alone. Order provided structure while chaos provided innovation. The galaxy was not broken, it was evolved. We may have been hasty in our assessment, Prime Directive finally admitted. Perhaps this new form of reality requires new forms of logical analysis. Elena offered to establish an exchange program between the Order entities and the reformed Devourers. Professor Entropy could teach the Order beings about creative contradiction, while they could help the Devourers develop more sophisticated forms of organized chaos. A collaboration between Order and Entropy? Prime Directive asked, its crystalline form shimmering with what might have been excitement. That would be unprecedented. Unprecedented is humanity's specialty, Elena replied with a grin. As she watched Order beings and Devourers work together to create new forms of stable impossibility, Elena reflected on how much had changed since she first touched the scanner.